Beautiful word, voyage.
It is, isn't it?
Conjures up that imagery of the open sea and
Or space. Galactic voyage.
Or going across the Nullarbor.
Yes, picking up a few Land Cruisers.
Oh, gosh.
No, it's good stuff. So you listen to Watch Your Voyage. We have none other than what is deemed as the most controversial comedian in the nation. We have Corey White.
Hello, Hamish. Thanks for having me, mate. It's a pleasure to be here in Port Adelaide.
That's it, mate. We're in the Woolstore precinct, just living it up.
It's not like Fremantle, I have to say.
Yeah, you guys got a little bit more going on. Although we do have pirate life.
We do have pirate life. We've just got fucking hipsters and an abundance of nouveau riche bogans who've made a lot of money out of the mining boom, and a testament to the fact that money can't buy taste.
No, but it does buy a big boat.
It does buy a big boat. That's true. That's true.
I was there for like a work thing, and I saw Packer's boat, the old was it the old military boat that he just completely refitted out for like $500 million?
Yeah, there's some seriously disgusting displays of wealth in that harbour. Twiggy's got some pretty amazing boats, but yeah, mate, it's the last place in the world they'll allow the working class to amass that much money.
Why do you think that is?
Western Australia got very lucky with the mining boom, and the country was asleep at the wheel to the rise of China and the hunger for our commodities. And we were, like I said, asleep at the wheel. And a lot of people saw the, I guess, ineptitude and incompetence at a company level as to the peripheral services that could be offered and tenements that were lapsing, and there was a lot of entrepreneurial and smart guys who got together, and there's some amazing stories about, you know, how tenements came into being and how they came to lapse and how some people made their money. And yeah, it's a really interesting place, and it is the Wild West.
What's tenements? What do you mean tenements?
So a mining tenement, it's like a grant of area where you're allowed to mine, and that gives you certain rights to harvest the minerals under the sand.
Yeah, okay. All right. And now every single one of those rights is taken. Have they figured out everything in Australia? Because I feel like we haven't really gone into uranium, and that could be the next fucking prolific boom.
Well, there's been a hostility to uranium mining in this country for a long time. I mean, is Olympic Dam your biggest uranium mine here?
I believe so.
I think there's Jabiru, and I think the moratorium was lifted in Western Australia, or there's pressure to do it. I'm not sure, but when I was a younger callow man, I was vehemently opposed to the uranium mining because I'd imbibed the greenie propaganda, and you saw things like Fukushima and of that nature, which, you've only got to get it wrong once in a nuclear power plant to have devastating and long-term consequences. But there's no better place in the world to do it than Australia. I mean, it's geologically stable, and we have an abundance of not just uranium but thorium.
We do
which has less half-life than uranium, and I think we've got 80% of the world's reserves. So
I think it would be like 10 times the worth that you buy if we started doing that on a global scale.
If Australia, see, this is the thing about Australia, particularly Western Australia, it is a first world economy with a third world resource management policy. And if we had the appropriate policy settings, we would be far wealthier than Saudi Arabia. When you factor in all the minerals, I mean, there's nothing you can't dig out of the ground in the Western.
But the question is, do we need, because obviously they have slaves over there, right?
They have slaves, yes.
So, to be that, do we need slaves, or will we be priced out?
No, we have everything under the sun. We are the most blessed nation in the world in mineral wealth. There's nothing you can't dig out of the ground. There's nickel, gold, cobalt, iron ore, English backpackers, you name it. You can dig it out of the ground in Western Australia, and we practically give it away. And, look at the wealth that Andrew Forrest and BHP and Rio Tinto and Gina Reinhardt have been allowed to amass from the iron ore. And we practically give it away. It is an absolute scandal, and the next 10 generations of West Australians will never forgive us. And we don't even have pokies in Western Australia to fill the state coffers. I believe you have poker machines in South Australia.
What the fuck are you doing when you're 10 beers deep?
Well, look, mate, we just got sports bet. The boys are on sports bet. You got your multi, and you're playing on some obscure track in bloody Sharting or something, and gambling. I think Australia's got the highest carbon emitters per capita, the fattest people per capita, and the highest gamblers per capita anywhere in the world.
But we only have the highest like carbon per capita because we do like smelting and stuff like that.
Well, we don't really smelt much. I mean, or we send all our iron ore offshore to be smelted, produced, and then we buy it back. But I think where we use a lot of energy is air conditioning, big cars. And I think that's where the majority of our, carbon output comes from. I think we only account for a small percentage of the global emissions, but on a per capita basis, we are a very energy-intensive society.
So given that you are given the title of most controversial, where are you sitting now on climate change?
Look, after the last 2 years, mate, I'm questioning everything that I've been led to believe in my political life. But look, I think there's no doubt that humans are affecting the climate. But who does what and what policy settings we're in, that's an open question. And I'm really skeptical of the people who are cheering on climate change as a Trojan horse for more authoritarian societies and more control over our everyday lives and to limit use of energy. I mean, you've even seen the story floated here this week about replacing your gas stoves with electric stoves. And anyone who's had to cook on an electric stove knows it's an absolute nightmare.
It's nowhere near as good. Takes ages.
Would rather see the planet burn than have to use an electric stove for the rest of my life.
Fucking preach to that.
Take that, Sarah Hanson-Young.
Yeah. Oh, you'll see me cooking on coal before that. No, actually, to be fair, I like the aesthetic of it, though. I will say that.
Of an electric stove?
Yeah, they're really nice. Like They look good. Like if you have a nice flat bench top. However, I tell you what even looks better, and it is gas again. But you know when you have like a beautiful marble or just like a nice stone bench top and the actual gas like, light bits, whatever you call it, the burner, is cut. There's a hole cut out of the stone and it just pokes up.
Yes.
That is the best aesthetic when it comes to a kitchen.
Yeah, well, look, you sound like you're more of a interior decor man than me. I'm a minimalist. I just like...
That is minimalist. You don't need the fucking extra stove, mate.
Just as long as you haven't got that manufactured stone that causes silicosis, you should be all right.
Yeah, look, you got to be careful.
You have to be careful, but everything causes cancer these days.
Everything's trying to kill you.
Everything's trying to kill you.
I actually heard that even that we're wearing like polyester clothing and stuff like that, the microplastics that get shedded from that over time, you would just go into your body and will fuck you over long term. And all the nylon blankets, all that kind of stuff, microplastic just sheds off it.
Yeah, and the hydrocarbon era has put an abundance of plastic into the ecosystem. I mean, look at the garbage patch out in the Pacific and what we wear and what we eat, and if it's in the food chains, we're eating on a micro level with food, and if it's in fish, know.
What's the effects of that? Like eating a bunch of plastic?
I don't think we'll know in our lifetime.
Can't be good,
but it can't be good, and I think we've played God, and we are about to live with the consequences of it.
I think so. And we were speaking before about the essentially the degradation of religion and the collapse of religion or morality, and that's been replaced.
Well, it's been replaced with this rampant consumerism. And like Nietzsche said, God is dead and ideologies fill the void. And I think people are coming to the end of that era of consumerism and materialism, and they're finding that it's leaving them unhappy and empty, and there's no meaning and no purpose to it. And I think people need something to believe in, and you just can't believe in a brand in the same way you can believe in an ideology like Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Hinduism. These things have been around for thousands of years, and there's a lot of wisdom in there. It's not ancient wisdom it's ancient wisdom for a reason, It's wisdom, and
it's tried and true, right?
It got
it's been
those societies through a lot of history and a lot of difficult times. So I think we're having a renaissance of religion of sorts. I noticed that, the amount of Christians that come to my shows and the doctors who spoke up against the vaccine, they all had a very sort of religious upbringing, in a sense, that informed their morality and their ethical code, and they stuck to their medical ethics because they believed in the Hippocratic Oath, and I think that was informed by their religious upbringings or beliefs, so to speak. So, look, really, I've always said religion's not all bad. Some of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life were Christian brothers who were great teachers, or people I know in my family who are devoutly religious, and we can agree to disagree on many things, but at the end of the day, they're the first people to help you out in an hour of need. And one of my favourite rappers, Immortal Technique's got a line.
Shout outs.
Yeah, he's if your religion makes you more tolerant and less judgmental and more accepting and more empathetic, that's a good thing. But the moment your religion makes you more judgmental, less tolerant, and less accepting of others, then your religion's failed you.
And how do you think that plays into? Because while that is great, but that's being weaponized as buzzwords by the left heavy now. Right?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, this is the thing. The left and the right are the same dog, different leg to me in terms of the way they behave.
It's like a horseshoe, right?
And this is where we're at. And this is what's so funny about, I guess, the breakdown of the traditional left-right spectrum is you've got, particularly with, I guess, the woke washing stuff and, flags this, awareness weeks, that it's united the old school left and the old school right.
I think so.
And it's such a strange alliance of political bedfellows. So, yeah, mate, it's an interesting time to be alive to see the fragmentation of the polity and, I guess, the breakdown of the traditional left-right spectrum that we've, been playing ping-pong with for the last however many years.
Fair. Now, just to go back to that, the Mortal Technique quote, I have something to press on that because, as a genuine question, because I don't know the answer, is if you're being tolerant of something that shouldn't be tolerated, many people say that when you go past two genders, shouldn't be tolerated because it's not fucking in a line with any kind of biology or any science that has existed in any modern history. So why the hell should we even appreciate and accept that when it's so transient?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I think the way to combat bad ideas like that one is with better ideas and in the marketplace of ideas to be able to combat it. But this is what I've noticed so much about the industry I work in the arts and comedy, is that side of the argument has a very censorious streak, and they don't want to sit down and have a dialogue, and they don't want to defend their ideas in the parliament of ideas. And I'm all for allowing people to make a choice, but let's go out and have some mortal combat in the parliament of ideas, and let's see who wins out. Because what I'm finding is that we're going through an enormous cultural election at this point in time, and I noticed it in Perth at the Fringe Festival there, and I've noticed it here too. And people are voting with their wallets on this, and the comedians who've got things to say about this issue are selling tickets, and the comedians who've hitched their wagon to it aren't. So that doesn't really answer your question, but how do you be tolerant of intolerant ideas? I mean, that's a problem as old as time itself, I guess, in a pluralistic society, and the only thing I would be able to say to that is you just got to be able to make sure that, everyone's got the right to speak, and that the most persuasive and potent ideas win the order of the day.
Yeah, I feel that. And I feel that it's if you're an adult, right, as long as you're not inflicting harm on anybody else, don't give a fuck what you're doing.
100%. My view is, you can fuck whoever you want to fuck as long as it's not a kid or an animal.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, that's how I see it. And
they've been doing that with the kids in school. Did you ever see the KGB defector?
Yuri Bezmenov.
That's the man.
I have seen that.
You've seen that video?
Too many times.
Oh, dude, it's fucked. So can we explain it to the people?
Yeah, look, I can't remember it because you plied me with beers at Pirate Life.
Oh, but mate, that's the way.
There was certain stages of decline, and one of them was demoralisation. And I firmly believe we are in the demoralisation process right now.
I think we are in the process here that it hasn't been completely executed yet in Australia. I think in America, they're 5-10 years ahead of us because they obviously were a greater target. And I think that's trickled over to us. And then when we're demoralised, well, we're just going to implode from the inside because we're not going to have any morale that we all connect to as a nation and as identity. And therefore, we're going to be weak. And then they're just going to take us over.
Well, and this is the thing. I mean, the algorithms have got people singing from different song sheets, and this is the legacy of COVID, I think, is division. We've got no social capital anymore. And the bonds of trust and mutuality and reciprocity that make democracy viable, they've gone.
Yeah, like,
And we got no trust in it or no faith in our institutions. And the problem with individuals or institutions for me is inability to have an honest reckoning with your own failings. No one wants to admit that they were wrong or have honest self-reflection, because that's hard work. We talked about the virtue of honesty before, and you know how our modern society has strayed from the virtues of truth and beauty. And like you said, truth is the first thing to go. Because truth is difficult. Truth is hard.
And as a microcosm, I use the example of a relationship, right? Because if you're in a relationship and you're like, oh, I want the truth.
You can't handle the I can't do monogamy truth. You know? I'm not saying that I can't do monogamy, but I mean, there's a lot of men who feel that way. And, you know, and beauty too. I mean, look how far we've strayed from beauty.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be truthful to have beauty, right?
Well, I think that's beautiful, to be honest.
Yeah.
To be true.
I mean, you look at a person, right? If I look at myself in the mirror and I call myself that I'm the most attractive thing ever, I'd be full of myself.
You are stunning and brave, Hamish.
I'm fucking beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But nonetheless, there's still a mountain to climb.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I think we've just created a generation
my man.
that don't want to hear the truth. I mean, some of the most important lessons I ever had to learn in my life was someone pulling me aside as a young fella and telling me a hard truth. And I had to improve. No comment. But yeah, I mean, you have to work harder, or you're just coasting on your charm. Things like that. Or you're being your shithead and you need to pull your head in. I mean, to answer your question honestly, I was in year 7 and I was hanging around the wrong crowd, and I was in detention with my year 7 teacher, and he said to me, Corey, you're a leader. You're a natural leader, and you need to pull your head out of your ass and stop hanging around these shitheads, because, I want to see you succeed, and, I want to see a society where kids like you grow into your shoes and become who you were supposed to be. And it took me a long time to, I guess, get my head around that and get my house and affairs in order. And I'm not comfortable with the idea of, people seeing me as a leader, because I don't think I'm that good. But I think all good people are full of self-doubt, and all the worst people are full of self-confidence.
Fucking true. Very true.
Do you see why they didn't let me host the project, by the way?
Yeah, they don't want that. They don't want you reading off that teleprompter.
They don't want me to lead them astray, is what I like to say. But no, gosh, that's Rod McManus's legacy to Australian comedy, The Project. It's such an abortion, they should call it Roe v. Wade. But he gave me a filthy look in the street over that joke the other day. Hi, Roves, if you're listening, say hi to your mum for me.
So good. Okay, so why, other than the obvious, why are you considered, how did you get the title the most controversial?
So what happened at the 2021 Fringe Festival in Perth, I decided it was going to be my last. I was going to take a job with the Aboriginal Legal Service up in the Pilbara, that place that subsidises the rest of the country. And I was following two stories at the time. They were both similar in nature because they both involved a resource company, an imbalance of power, and a whistleblower. The first one was about East Timor and the spying operation that we deployed on the East Timorese, who are our wartime ally. And your good South Australian Alexander Downer was the foreign minister at the time, who later took a job with Woodside, as did the head of ASIS, David Irvine.
Seems to be the way.
Well, and Ashton Calvert, who was the head of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. But we spied on a wartime ally, and this was a country that's got one of the highest rates of infant mortality in the world. And we bullied them. Alexander Downer's reportedly said to the leader of East Timor, I'm going to give you a lesson in realpolitik. I mean, this is not the conduct of a responsible or good neighbour. So anyway, there was a lawyer who was tasked with representing the whistleblower, Witness K, and East Timor, and he was charged by ASIO for doing his job. And I was really outraged about that story, and it upset me that the members of my profession in the law weren't more upset about it, because it was an attack on what we did and the principles that underpinned the right to a fair trial, and it was an attack on democracy in a really egregious way.
Why was it an attack on democracy?
Well, because he was charged in secret. He wasn't allowed to see the brief of evidence. His lawyers weren't allowed to see the brief of evidence. It was really Kafkaesque. And when he was negotiating with the Commonwealth DPP about what they would call witness K, well, they chose the name K because Kafka. And so anyway,
Kafka?
Franz Kafka wrote some really dystopian novels about the perils of the Soviet Union and dystopian societies. And anyway, Woodside was the principal sponsor of the Fringe Festival in 2021, had been for some time, and they had a censorship clause inserted into the contracts where we weren't allowed to make fun of the sponsors. And as a comedian with a socio-political bent, I was outraged. And no one else was. And it was the same thing with the law about Bernard Collaery. And no one wanted to put their head above the parapet and speak out about what was an egregious attack on what we did, because they were afraid of being pigeonholed or labelled or overlooked for promotion. So I decided I was going to donate the proceeds of that show that year to the East Timor Hearts Fund. And I was really going at Andrew Forrest and Woodside, and I was making a lot of traction, getting a lot of noise, selling out shows, got 2 5-star reviews. Was asked to put on an encore season, and then one night I got heckled by some, no other way to say this, politically adolescent brats with blue hair who were upset about a joke that they didn't understand, and they heckled me, and the audience grew tired of their interruptions, as did I, and I made an off-colour heckler retort, and I said, well, look, I've got to go, and these guys said, yeah, good, fuck off, and I said, well, look, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, clearly, but the reason I have to go is that I'm a criminal lawyer, I'm going home to prepare a bail application, and I might get a rapist out on bail next week, so get home safe.
That's savage.
It was savage. And unbeknownst to me, there was a rather portly ginger man in the front row who was a journalist from the West Australian, who then proceeded to heckle me.
Yep.
Telling me to punch up. And, after 4 weeks of, joking about corruption to benefit a charity in East Timor, like real toxic white man shit, it kind of annoyed me. And he kept going, and I said to him, look, I know you're upset that Corona cancelled your yearly sex trip to Asia, and you can't go and empty your balls into a ladyboy in Thailand, but it's not my fault. And I said, fuck you, and I walked off. Anyway, he threatened me with defamation. He used his weight to lean on the venue to have me cancelled, and the venue published a statement saying that, I told aggressive racist rape jokes, that I was a bad person, that I was a bad comedian. Triple M tried to set me up for a hatchet job of an interview. It's a journalist who now works at Sky News who tried to hijack the story and further her vanity in the media because she knew about the story that was about to break the following day, which was the Brittany Higgins story. So I went on Triple M and I was unapologetic because I had a recording of what happened. And I said, I'll put it into the court of public opinion and I'll be judged by the public, but not by someone who works for Rupert Murdoch by day and Kerry Stokes by night. And the public overwhelmingly came into bat for me. So anyway, it was a hit job done on me in the local paper after that, and I went on SBS on a program about cancel culture, and the venue found out, so they briefed a high-powered law firm in Perth to write to SBS to try and cancel me from a program about cancel culture, which is it's irony at a base level. But anyway, we filmed for SBS, and that was it was International Women's Day. Brittany Higgins was giving a speech at the National Press Club, and I was asked down the barrel of the camera, Corey, can you understand how women might be upset about a joke about rape? And I said, absolutely, but if I can't tell a rape joke, how am I supposed to make fun of the Liberal Party? And if you had told 25-year-old me that the Liberal Party would have saved my career, I just would have been astonished. But the joke didn't get to go to air because the government of the day, in the lead up to an election, lent on the public broadcaster, I'm told. And it went to print, but not to air. And I have also had a vendetta against the industry about what happened to me, because there's a very different standard in this country if you're accused of rape multiple times as opposed to telling a joke about it. And I was raising money for charity, and I was suddenly an incel and a men's rights apologist and a neo-Nazi and every fucking buzzword under the sun, where there's other people in the industry who are not only allowed to work and their reputation is protected because their agencies paid hush money, non-disclosure agreements. And that was why I was so pissed off about it, because I wasn't given the right to a fair hearing. And when the recording came out and I didn't threaten anyone with rape, no one came and said, okay, we got that wrong. Sorry, Corey, we shouldn't have terminated that.
Well, they never do. And you even see that with misinformation of any kind, right? Like you see it with the Ukraine war. They literally use like Modern Warfare 2 footage and said it was from the war. And that went all around the world. Everybody thought it was that. And then what? They had no campaign anywhere near the size of that saying, oh, that was false.
Well, it's like
and everybody makes their opinion.
It's like what Mark Twain said, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has had time to put its pants on. And that's the world we live in, where lies spread quicker than truth. And with Ukraine, for example, I mean, what is the first casualty of war? It is truth. And, the Ukraine war, I mean, how bad is it? I mean, we finished up in Afghanistan, and then how many months later, we're at war in Europe again. And now we've got German tanks going across Eastern Europe towards Russia. I mean, come on, like, this is scaring me.
Oh, dude, it looks like we're the precipice of like actual World War III.
And, everyone, this is what no one wants to talk about in Australia, is that the Americans are unhinged. The Chinese are terrifying, and the Americans are unhinged. And it is a case of the devil you know and the devil you don't. But we are not an ally of the Americans. We are a vassal, and we are expendable to them. And they are going to take us to the precipice of World War III.
And why do you say that? Why are we not an ally?
Well, what did Henry Kissinger say? It's dangerous to be one of America's enemies, but it's more dangerous to be one of America's friends. Look what they did to Gough Whitlam in 1975. They talk about it was a constitutional crisis. It was not a constitutional crisis. It was a crisis with the security agencies, because the Americans were terrified that he was going to withdraw the Pine Gap Treaty. And that's the jewel in their counterintelligence crown. The first two nuclear targets in any exchange between Russia and America are in Australia. It's Pine Gap in Alice Springs and the VLF base at Exmouth, Harold Holt. And I don't know if there's been advances in modern warfare technology that make that obsolete. Maybe satellites are now the first things to go. But certainly the relay station at Pine Gap and the VLF base at Exmouth, that's how they communicate with all their submarines, nuclear submarines around the world. And the submarines are primarily an attack weapon. So, and Malcolm Fraser, of all people, wrote a book called Dangerous Allies, making the same point. So, look, maybe the dog has bolted and it's too late and we've hitched our wagon to the Americans and there's no going back for us because we don't have an Indigenous defence capability. We're stuck with what we've got. Cancel culture got so bad there it was affecting French submarine contracts. And what have we got? The morale in the Defence Force in this country is so low. You talk to anyone who's a serving member in the Defence Force and they will tell you how bad the morale is. It's the first thing they want to talk about.
And why is that? Just because of the woke shit? Or
there is that element, but also look what happened to the SAS with the Brereton inquiry.
True.
I mean, there was Angus Houston and everyone in the top part of the chain of command, they knew what was going on. They were part of it. But you get to a point in the army where you stop being a soldier and you become a politician. And they sold out the boys. And you know what? I'm sure some shit happened in Afghanistan and war is ugly. And there are some probably blokes there who did the wrong thing. But by and large, the vast majority of those guys just wanted to serve their country and they were good operators at what they did. And they've all been tarred with the brush of, a couple of bad apples and they've tainted the whole barrel. So, yeah, look, the Defence Force is in disarray in this country and they're having an enormous amount of problem recruiting people into the Defence Force. So why would you go work for your country when you're expendable like that? They'll take your medals away and they'll kick you out without even a fair hearing.
Yeah. I mean, and also I think that the internet has kind of like raised us to have a lot more distrust in our government. for the people. I mean, look, it's kind of a bit of both, isn't it? Because you got people that just go along with the trend for the day and go along with what any big business says is the trend of the day now, and they all hitch together and just post some black squares.
Well, it's the herd morality, isn't it? And the herd mentality, and that's what I've been talking a lot about in my show. And yeah, I mean, it was the meme. I support the current thing, and that was what was so funny about the war in Ukraine, is it kind of ended COVID in many ways, because war puts things into perspective. And the propaganda was the same channels, the same methodology. The profile pictures changed. The censorship remained the same. Anyone who had a different opinion. I mean, look how hard it is to access the Oliver Stone interviews now with Vladimir Putin.
I haven't even tried, but yeah, is it hard?
It's hard. You can't even go and access them on YouTube. They put misinformation warnings on the other stuff, and they would have pulled it down if, they had their way. But Oliver Stone is a heavyweight of, I guess, leftist filmmaking and contrarianism in the American space. So yeah, mate, it's an interesting time to be alive, and it's just, like Orwell says, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act, and it's not a popular role.
No, it's not. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I feel like, and I was saying this to you just before, is if you can muster up the balls to call out any of this shit that we're talking about, or whatever you think there is to call out, it's kind of like an act of duty at this point because of how fucking delusional we've become. I
couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And this is why I have the utmost respect for people who had the courage to speak out in 2020 and 2021, because I remember how hostile that climate was. Doing stand-up with it, I mean, I remember getting booed off stage violently for questioning the vaccine one night.
And how did you approach it on that kind of night?
That night I changed it up because I was like, well, I'd been winning them over with deceiving them at first and winning them over and then giving them what I thought. But that night I went out just guns blazing from the get-go, and it got everyone offside immediately. But I do remember...
Was it saying something like, the transmissibility is fucking...
I just opened with that. So, do you guys think we should be tolerant of minority groups? And all that? They're like, yeah. So I'm unvaccinated, and boom! Like, it was wild. And I did one gig one night in 2022, and I had to sneak into a venue with the fake passport, and I just made this off-the-cuff comment that, I hope the virus kills all those filthy unvaccinated scum, the vermin that they are. And the crowd erupted in laughter and applause. And my heart sank. Because, the year before, I was a celebrated member of the lefties and raising money for a charity in protest of being censored by an oil and gas company, thinking of people other than myself. And 12 months later, I was on the verge of being ostracised from society for an indeterminate period of time. And people who weren't on the other side of that argument don't know what it was like. You don't know what it was like to have your entire society turn on you on a dime and say, well, you're no longer a decent member of society. Were you ever? You should be denied access to healthcare. You should be ostracised from society. And it broke my heart. It really did. And it's, when you've seen a side of someone that you just can't unsee.
Yep.
And that's lurking under the surface in most people. And yeah, just gave me a new appreciation for how easy it was for Hitler to come to power, because most people were too afraid to speak out.
Yeah, well, it's not only that they were too afraid to speak, it's they were too afraid to act with sovereignty. Because it's not only that they didn't say, I'm going to stand up for you as well, it's also they didn't even fucking stand up for themselves.
No, 100%. And, we just rolled over. That Australian spirit that I grew up with, where Jack is as good as his master, and we don't live in that country anymore. And I don't know if it's ever coming back. And the people who've got it still, I guess, predominantly country folk, I found, Christians, and I guess the migrant community, the Greeks, the Italians, the Croatians, the Serbians. They were some of the first people in this country to put their hands up and go, no, this is bullshit. We smell communism here, because it's not that far removed from their cultural memory as European migrants who saw how those things came about.
Yeah, well, I know, like, one of my best mates, his he has family members that, like his grandparents' parents, so his great grandparents, like they were part of being raped and pillaged. You know, and when you hear those stories growing up, like it's not far removed.
No.
Whereas we've had no civil wars that are of any, you know, crazy
We're so
might.
cosseted and insulated and pampered in this society. We've become soft.
We have become soft in cities, definitely, because there's been no reason to be tough.
No. And masculinity is being demonized. And this is why I feel sorry for young men, because and no wonder they're confused about masculinity, because on one hand you've got the hyper-materialism and let's say toxic masculinity of Andrew Tate, and on the other hand you've got Harry Styles telling you to wear a dress. No wonder they're confused, but I think our society needs more strong men now, and enlightened strong men. And just because you're a man who's got good physical attributes and you like to work out and be fit and healthy doesn't mean you're toxic and you hit women and you have all these Philistine views about the world. I mean, I know lots of great men who are into their BJJ and kickboxing and MMA who are smart, critical thinkers, but if you were to do a quick, 1 second social media biopsy on that person, your neo-progressives would go, oh, toxic, get him away from me. Healthy level of testosterone, pig.
I saw this quote, and it was, I'm going to butcher it right now, but nonetheless, the quote was essentially, if you have your academics be weak and your warriors be dumb, then your academics will fucking just have absolutely weak ideologies, and your warrior. Oh, fucking! I need to find it.
Yeah, no, I can't. You know what? I know the quote you're talking about.
I think I even made a screenshot of it.
And it's spot on.
Give me like 2 seconds, eh? No, this is one about a wife.
The philosopher king and the philosopher warrior. I mean,
oh, this one's kind of. Hey, actually, this is it. I just told my wife, I'm sorry we have to raise children in these dystopian times. She recalled a quote she read just today. Never feel sorry for raising dragon slayers in a time where there are actual dragons. That's a different one, but that's fucking good too.
That is a good quote.
Shout out to that Facebook quote. But yeah, essentially, we need, you look at Marcus Aurelius as just an absolutely fucking stunning example of just a deep dive into Stoicism. He wasn't a pussy by any means. He went through the hardest shit, and he was the king.
Yes.
He was the ruler. So he had the most pressure and the opportunity to be as debaucherous as he want and to just be an absolute demon. And you know what? He wasn't. And he explained his day-to-day functions.
And I think everyone should have to read Meditations. And I think there's been a renaissance of philosophy in the last 2 years, because in times of moral or spiritual or political crisis, people turn to art and philosophy to help them make sense of what's going on around them. And I know I drew an enormous amount from art and philosophy in particular. And the Stoics, I do the joke about having the AstraZeneca, to help me get through. And yeah, look, it's a really important thing, and people want to turn to TikTok influencers or Instagram psychologists, but ancient wisdom is ancient wisdom for a reason, and these things have stood the test of time, the classics, for a good reason. There's a lot of good things in there.
Bloody oath. And there definitely are some speakers that are drawing on those, like Jordan B. Peterson, I think has been an absolute cultural light for men.
He has been. And you know what's so funny about Jordan Peterson is all he wanted to do was help alienated, isolated young men. And look what he's become. I mean, the poor guy, he's been the subject of so much hate, and unjustified hate too, in my view. And there's only so much hatred you can endure before it takes a toll on your soul.
Yeah, well, he definitely went through some wild health issues. Like, he nearly died.
Yeah.
Did you listen to that podcast where he fully described how he had to go to Russia to get healed?
Yes. And, Lord. Everyone on the left, just Dr. Benzo Head. Dr. Benzo Head. Well, that's the compassionate, tolerant, inclusive people I've come to know in the arts. But all he wanted to do was help. And, there's a darkness in him now. The light has left his eyes, if you ask me.
Yeah, but that being said, he does cry a lot. when he talks about.
And isn't that toxic? You know, men who cry and show their emotions and be vulnerable. I mean, God help us.
Well, it's powerful.
It
Powerful.
absolutely is powerful, and I'm not ashamed to admit. You know, I mean, what I went through last week, I cried an enormous amount. But they were variant of tears. They were joyful tears, or fearful tears. But you know, let's normalise men being able to cry now and then. You know, it's not a bad thing. I think, you know, people who repress those emotions, they come out in unhealthy ways. And one of my favourite quotes is Nietzsche. He said, "All truths that remain silent eventually become poisonous." And I think crying is a way of releasing the truth about what's happened in your emotional state, because if you don't, it'll become poisonous and it'll manifest in an unhealthy way.
Definitely.
I like that. What are your thoughts on Eckhart Tolle?
Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, Eckhart Tolle. Yeah, that's how you say it.
Yeah, look, I've read some Eckhart Tolle.
Now I reckon.
Look, I'll have to be honest and say I don't know, and I haven't read enough of Eckhart Tolle to make an informed comment about it. From what I did read, though, it was all a bit airy-fairy and lots of buzzwords, you know, and I think there's a lot of charlatans getting around in this new age healing space, and, you know, the healing guru is, oh, you know, for just $49.99 a month, I can help you realise your inner truth, and by the way, let me finger you there. You know, there's some of these predatory spiritual healers getting around.
Have you listened to Born Sinner by J. Cole, like that album?
No.
Oh, it's fucking great. He has like, it's all about religion. Like when they have it on the TVs, and it's just $5.99. You could be happy.
Yeah,
stuff like that. And he has a full skit about it. It's great.
Yeah, well, I mean that comes from, I guess, the Christian evangelicals in the States, and the point you talked about. You know, we're kind of got a bit of lag time between what's happening here culturally, politically, and what's happening in the States. Well, now's the time to start organising and start having these conversations, because if we don't, that's coming here. And what I fucking hate that's going on in this country is the Americanization of it. It's everywhere you go, from the culture to the politics to the journalism to the fast food. I mean, there's fucking Taco Bell in town. There's Costco out at the airport. They're bringing out Wendy's. Like, there's a country we should stop emulating. It's that one.
Yeah, well, they're literally on their decline, and we can see it broad as daylight.
Well, and we're at the broader end of a decline of European empires more generally. I think, you know, the Opium War was probably the opening salvo and the decline of the British Empire. Then you throw in the abolition of slavery, because you got to remember the backbone of the colonial empire was opium, tobacco, and slavery. They've lost largely all of those things. So we are really, and you know, when at the end of the Second World War, the baton passed from the British to the Americans. And now we're at the point, well, is the baton going to pass from the Americans to the Chinese, or the Americans to the Russians? Because the Russians and the Chinese, that's an alliance, and it's a geographical alliance that's going to be very hard to counter.
Well, have you seen the alliance?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, aren't they like buying gold at unfathomable rates right now?
They've been doing so for a long time.
Yeah. So aren't they trying to essentially create their own currency that's backed by gold?
Yes, but which
is better than a central bank digital currency, might I add.
Well, I mean, but this is Sajid Das wrote a book called The Banquet of Consequences, and he's done a follow-up to that. But we're at the point in our history where there are no easy options left for us anymore. All of the policy options are unpalatable to someone, and hold on to your seats, because we are not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. And you know what? If someone staged a coup in this country in the next 2 years, I wouldn't be surprised.
As in to like take over the country and become a dictatorship?
Because we've kind of got this parliamentary paralysis, and we can't really get things done in this country unless you're Mark McGowan in Western Australia and you've got a whopping majority of both houses of parliament and you can do whatever you fucking want. Except anything in the public interest, might I add.
Yeah, well, the states did pretty good, although they did handle their authority off to the bureaucracy pretty quickly.
Well, I mean, this is the thing about democracy. I mean, the parliament comes and goes, but the bureaucracy stays.
Yeah, well, I mean, what? Fucking Klaus Schwab's already said, you know, we have so many, I'm paraphrasing, so many sleeper cells all around the world. We have
just need a
presidents.
strong leader to come up and take power.
He is just surely he's a part. Like he's fucking just
know
he
what?
fits the criteria of being the supervillain too well.
And you know what amuses me is that the mainstream press go, this conspiracy around it. It's like, they're not doing anything to quell conspiracy theory.
Not at all.
And it's like, well, conspiracy theories come about because the official narrative is so inadequate or clearly fraudulent and illogical. And speculation fills the void. And if that void is not filled by the fourth estate and good journalism, it's filled by other state actors.
Yes.
And
But
misinformation.
the fourth estate has become the estate.
Well, the media's job of questioning power has long been over. They are agents of power. And that was painfully apparent during
In
the
COVID.
and before your time, the weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, true.
Remember that? The
Yes.
weapons of mass destruction that never existed, and George Bush laughed about it at a president's correspondence dinner. You know, and the lies that we've been inflicted in the 21st century. Remember, the zeitgeist is fear, fraud, and farce. And it began with the Y2K bug. And then it was the war on terror. Then it was weapons of mass destruction. And then it was the global financial crisis. And what all those things have in common is that no one's ever been held to account.
Yep.
And it was always the poor that paid the price. And this was what was so funny about COVID. It was that it was the working class who were the first people to stand up, at least where I was. And the working class has always been the moral conscience of this country. You go back to the conscription referendums in the First World War, it was the Irish Catholics who were opposed to it vehemently because of, we don't want to go fucking fight for England. Second World War, refusing to load the ships bound for Japan laden with iron. It was the fucking working class who stood up. The conscription referendums in Vietnam, it was the working class that stood up. And it was the same thing with COVID because they weren't the laptop class who can go and work from home. It was the tradies who were like, I can't work from home, mate. I'm a trader. I work with my hands. I go and build shit. I make things. You go and sit there and punch data into your fucking spreadsheet and you want to sit there and tell me I'm not an essential worker. Fuck right off. And
Yeah, that was big when they were like, yeah, when they just deemed who was essential and who wasn't.
well, and you know,
Like that
a lot of people heard that in a very bad way.
Yeah, well, they were just like, what? So I don't fucking matter.
I don't matter. That's how you feel about me? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, they did. That being said, they did prop people up with income.
Yes, but now
worse.
we're paying the price of that down at the shopping centre. I mean,
Yeah,
say what you will about Kevin Rudd and that Labor government with the GFC, they gave the money directly to the punter. There was no middleman. Harvey Norman didn't get a fucking enormous amount of money out of JobKeeper. Nick Scarley Furniture didn't get an enormous amount out of JobKeeper. It went straight to the source, or the people who needed it. There was no middleman to thin out or dilute the amount of money. But what's happened is that, and this is what I think is going to happen in this country, is that the previous government injected all that money into the economy knowing that the consequences of inflation would mature by the next federal election cycle, and they'll sweep to power on the back of, Labor's a terrible economic manager. Every time they get the economy, they fuck it up. Only the Liberals can be trusted with managing the economy. And I think that's the strategy. And I could be wrong.
Yeah, see, I don't know, because I think quantitative easing has just been the mechanism in which fucking countries all around the world have been pulling. I don't think it's a party thing. Like, I think the world has just had, like, well, not the world, the Western world has had a bad sense of economic policy.
No, we have. And, you know, like I said, we're out of easy policy options now.
Yeah, well, shit's getting expensive. You know, like, I mean, look, today it's down to $1.65, but you go back a few years, for the average to be $1.65 per litre for unleaded is fucked. You know, that's like, that's a ridiculous price for it to just be hanging at.
And to be at the whims of the international oil cartels. You know, you talked about oligopoly before. Well, there's not a better example of it than that.
So where the fuck's next? What's 2023 going to bring, do you reckon?
Well, to me, it's renaissance or it's reckoning.
Well, I think it's both.
Well, you know, we're
going to have both, right? Because there's always polarity.
Yes, and look, I mean, I'm hoping it's renaissance, but I'm also hoping for a bit of reckoning, because I just don't see how we're going to break through this collective psychosis and apathy that we're in without some sort of tectonic event.
Yeah, well, I think that we're going to have the renaissance come from the people that are going to rebuild. And they're going to get there. We're going to get our shit together. We are the fucking renaissance. Let's be real. We're the ones thinking about these things while everybody else is just going along with the agenda. And, you know, it's up to us to start getting our house in order and being able to weather the darker storms that are coming.
Because they're coming.
Well, look at the currencies are going to collapse. You know, they're already all saying we're going to move to a central bank digital currency. Like fucking the UK's come out and said this brightest day.
Friday.
Rishi Sunak's come out and said that.
He said a brightest day. And then we've even had fucking parliamentarians in Australia now parrying on about it. So it's not a matter of if our currency is going to change. It's fucking changing. Like they've all come out and said it. Just because we haven't woken up and gone, oh, what does that actually mean for us? Like, our currency is about to get fucking reamed.
And you know what's so funny about all this is this is one of the things Alex Jones was right about.
Yeah, right. I think he did a thing. I heard this. He did a thing the other day for like the whole day where he's like, everything I was right about, and did like a whole day of it.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Jones got plenty of things wrong, but I mean, if that's the metric we're going to use to hold journalists or influencers to account, then the entire Australian press gallery needs to fucking resign en masse, because what have they been right about? Like let's take the last 5-6 years. They got Brexit wrong, they got Trump wrong, they got Scott Morrison wrong, they got COVID wrong. I mean, the only thing they haven't been fucking wrong about is that the sun will come up tomorrow. And they sit there and they go, why does no one listen to us anymore? What's the problem of your own making?
Well, they're only just coming out with the COVID.
Yes.
Saying there was a lab leak and saying, oh, yeah, this looks like
what's
story.
your thought on this? Is this a controlled demolition of the narrative?
As in, are they slowly leaking it out so then it looks like it was just all, you know, they were all blindly unaware? And
yeah, I mean, look, I've seen news.com and, you know, the Murdoch press start to run with these stories where other media outlets aren't. And
well, it's just the world press is of the West is all coming out with it. And I think they're basing it off this FBI report, and it's like the official source. But like, there's a lot of corruption that goes on there by history. And let's be real, within the first 6 months, we knew all this shit. All the information was available. And if I, as a 27-year-old, you know, well, I was 25 then, could have deduced all these things and listened to just these professionals in their field coming out with it, and every single person that is supposed to be well-educated and be able to have a reasonable, logical train of thought to deduce fucking conclusions only figured it out 2.5 years later. Are you all fucking dumb? Are you stupid?
It's a painful reality.
Like,
You did your own research, did ya? You've been wearing a tinfoil hat. You're going to kill my nana.
I honestly don't think I got anything wrong.
No.
I haven't, and I would like to be wrong. I don't want any of what I'm saying to
And
be true. Like, it sucks. These are not good findings.
I had some fallouts with some, you know, long-term friends, you know, and, you know, old school lefties. And this is what blew my mind. It was just like, what happened to lefties during that whole thing? You know, because they used to be these gentle, interesting, humorous, subversive people who were suspicious of all the major institutions like the government, the media,
Big Pharma,
the international
big
pharmaceutical
business, all of
companies.
it.
And then you introduce the right amount of fear and the ability to morally grandstand on social media, and they turn to these bootlicking demons who wanted to see you ostracized from healthcare and society, and they can't admit that they're wrong. And this is the problem. I think people want to retreat to the lie, because retreating to the lie absolves you of responsibility, and you don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that's why washing your hands for surgery wasn't introduced until 30 years after it was discovered. Because the surgeons then had to go, oh, fuck, I'm responsible for all those deaths because I didn't wash my hands. Took 30 years, and it was only lemon and water.
Well, and that was the same with thalidomide. I mean, thalidomide was allowed to be on sale for I think, up to 6 months after people knew what was going on. And one
Or
of
the
the
Teflon pans.
and one of the doctors who broke the story about it in Australia, he was an Australian guy, Dave McBride's father out of Sydney. So, moral courage is something that lacks enormously in our societies.
But we don't foster that either. Like, I don't think we have an education system that particularly fosters that. So, like, on one hand, I want individual responsibility to be the most paramount thing in our society because I think that's what actually makes it work. And at the same time, I understand that control systems, are functioning. And I think that since the Industrial Revolution, we've had an education system that has done what? What's the main thing in school? Put your fucking hand up and don't talk and only speak when you're spoken to.
It's conditioning.
You're conditioned to accept and obey authority, and then you leave. This is the funniest part, right? You're conditioned to put your hand up for anything you want to say, and then as soon as you become an adult and you put your hand up in a restaurant, it's rude.
I never thought of that.
What the click thing I get. The click thing I
Clicking's
get.
cunty.
But putting your hand up in a restaurant is seen as rude after you get conditioned for 13 years of school to put your hand up.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, it's they're just I guess boot camps for preparing the next generation of managerial elite, and
Well, AI is going to fuck with that heavy.
oh,
Because, look,
we haven't even gone down that rabbit hole.
Dude, well, think about it. Like, if you have an AI can nearly replace, as soon as it becomes to the point where it can conduct experiments, because right now it's just a humanitarians professor. It just like grabs information and then gives its best summary of what's going on. But as soon as it can conduct any of its own experiments, it will go, all right, based on all the footage, fucking Sally and Jim have been having about 35 minutes a week more lunch break than everybody else. So, this is how we should probably punish them. But obviously we want to be a good HR, and it will say this in a chat bot that will talk to you, and then you just have to go do it. And I don't know, who knows? The pay might just be docked immediately. And that's just HR, right? And it might come up with, maybe go check on how they're going, or they'll go to a chat bot and they'll talk to it. But that's all assuming this is like like a warehouse scenario, I guess. But then you go one step further and you look at what Elon's trying to bring out, and he says he's going to bring out these robots that are going to be able to perform like basic duties and whatnot for his goal's $20,000.
Well, Gina Reinhardt's mine, Roy Hill in Newman, Western Australia, they've got essentially a dog that follows you around from your donga to the workplace under the guise of keeping the women on site safe. But it's filming you, and it's sending the feedback to the control room at HR, making sure you're getting to your room on time, you're not doing the wrong thing, and
Dude, it's fucked.
all these things are coming in under the guise of safety.
Safety and security. But you know what? I'm pretty sure it's George Washington said, I'd rather dangerous freedom than peaceful slavery.
Yes, well, it's like I'd rather the tempestuous sea of liberty than the calm waters of despotism.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true.
And those American founding fathers, they were really so far ahead of their time with that document, because, I mean, I have a lot of haterade for what America has become. But the original founding fathers, they were on the money with a lot of things.
Do you know how old they were?
They were old men by the time they got to do that. How old were they, in their 50s?
Nah.
40s?
Now, get this. When they actually settled America, the founding fathers were between 18 and 24.
Wow. I'd like to know how old Tom Paine was when he wrote Common Sense.
How far have we fallen? The 18 to 24-year-olds are
But
fucking
you've got to remember that the
settling
average
new
life
lands.
expectancy back then wasn't what it is now.
Yeah, but also the average life expectancy doesn't take into account the fact that there was a huge amount of humans that died in their first 18 years.
Yeah, well, infant mortality was huge. I mean,
So if you take that out of it, what is it? I don't actually know off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's significantly older than what it says is like the mean.
Yeah, no, it's a interesting period in history. My one of my best friends is obsessed with Hamilton.
What about it?
Well, just all the things Hamilton wrote about and his experience of being, I guess, a poor person who rose to prominence in that world, and his fear of populism. And yeah, I haven't read the book. He's been badgering me to do it, but he's like, read Hamilton, you have a better understanding of the United States. I've just been letting it collect dust. Sorry,
Yeah,
Robert.
well, mate, you just go watch the play.
Well, I'm one of these old school types that, I think the books are always better.
Well, look, it's definitely primary evidence.
Primary, I haven't heard that since I was uni for a little while. But no, and it's in the same time, especially with the social media and the tech giants, and we've just seen the banning of TikTok being proposed around the world today. I think the US federal government's given their employees 9 days or something,
Was it the US? I thought it was just Canada.
I think the US is given it for their federal employees.
Yeah, okay.
But I think Canada's floating the ban on it.
Just for their federal employees as well.
Well, I don't know about the federal employees in Canada, but
Yeah, it was. I saw the article in one of the Australian papers, and it said it was just for parliamentarians and like people in government.
the dog's bolted, mate. We're already so compromised by the Chinese.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't
We've
mean
been
we
asleep
need
at the
to be
wheel
more.
for that too.
Yeah. I mean, they're really good at just collecting data, but they haven't been able to deal with it all yet.
Well, that we know of.
Yeah, I mean, however, did you hear about Google's quantum computing that came out a few years ago?
No.
So essentially, what took the best supercomputers in the world 10,000 years to compute takes a quantum computer 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, the world that Huxley feared is here.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
literally
I was
just
just about
finished
to
that book the
yeah.
other day.
It's here.
Yeah, sorry, Bjorn, you had something to say?
Yeah, I would agree. It's here, and we're like, where did it come from? It's like blindsided us.
Well, we were so distracted by the dazzling lights
The
and
trend of the
illusion
new month.
and the bread and circuses. And that was what was really interesting about COVID for me, was that, as long as you could still get booze and as long as people could still watch the footy, they weren't too upset.
No, well, it was when they
Australians
couldn't
are-
go, right?
Yeah, well,
But that's Rome. That's Rome.
bread and circuses.
That's Rome. That's the one thing we learnt. You know, from the collapse of Rome, just keep them fucking entertained. And now we're doing it better than ever. Even think about just how we even build a house now. What did we used to have? A fair bit of fucking garden. You would not be able to, in terms of like, in your council or whatever, build like over 50% on your land.
No.
Whereas now it's like everybody's doing their renovations and they're getting everything done so they can take up like 90% of their land with indoor building.
You know what's really fascinating is that home ownership's a very deep-seated cultural value in Australia and the US, but in most of Europe it's not. And the reason is the 1920s, home ownership was promoted very explicitly in Australia and the US. And get this on the basis that debt-incumbent homeowners don't go on strike. And it was a way of making the unions docile because, I've got a mortgage, man. I can't afford to go on strike. I don't want to lose my job. I want to pay my mortgage. I've got a roof on my head. I want to keep it.
Fair point. However, I do fundamentally believe in the foundational idea of being able to own your own property.
I do too.
Now, at the same time, I don't think we're living in that world in any level close to absolutism. You don't want to own more than 4 properties, you're paying a tax. Like, you're fucking renting it off the
I
government.
don't think
essentially.
anyone needs to own more than 4, well, particularly residential properties.
Need, want, it's a right? If you can do it, if you can muster it up to be able to do it, why shouldn't you be able to?
Well, I just don't think residential property is for speculating and making money. Residential property is for living. And I think that should be look, yes, if you want to accrue a house in Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide and Perth and Darwin and Tasmania, right, okay, that's fine. But there are people, particularly in Western Australia, who own upwards of 200 residential properties. And it's all a tax break, right? The negative gearing,
of course.
gravy train.
But that's also because we've moved away from a free market. Like, we've turned into a crony capitalism where it's like the big dogs get way better treatment.
This is the problem.
And there's been so much helping the market and regulating the market instead of just letting the world happen as it should.
The problem I see is people talk about socialism and communism, but what we have is a form of corporatism.
Yeah,
and it's
crony capitalism.
Crony capitalism, and it's essentially fascism. And the state has been captured by the most powerful economic actors in every policy area. And we've got to move away from that. We've got to reclaim our institutions. And
yeah, well, it's big business and big government have become intertwined now.
They're the same thing.
And you have like this reliance on the welfare state. And a big part of it started, and this is not to say women shouldn't have rights, but it started when women got rights because they all started to get taxed as soon as they got jobs. Whereas before that, like as we were talking before, like you could afford a house and kids, put them all through school and have a good life on one man's income. Now you're struggling to even buy a home and have food on your table with two people on a full-time income.
That's really interesting. I learned at uni when I was doing wills and estates was one of the first things to change after women got the vote was change to what's called testamentary freedom, which was the ability to you to disseminate your assets however you wanted under your will. You could give it away to whoever you want.
Yeah.
Because at common law, women didn't have any rights to the property, let alone the children. So the courts of family provision came in and allowed the court to come in and redistribute or change your will after you were dead if you didn't properly make provision for your kids or your dependents or your ex-wife. Because, there were some bastards who were out there just going, I'm not going to leave anything to my wife and kids, fuck them, and the burden fell onto the state. So the state was like, well, no, we need to come in and go, all right, we need the ability for the courts to go in and redistribute that and change the will after you're dead. So you gave women the vote and men lost their testamentary freedom, but it was probably a good thing. I've digressed there slightly and I don't know why that was relevant, but these boys took me out for beers at Pirate Life before.
Oh, you only had a couple, come on.
Yeah, but I'm a little tacker, mate. You see the size of me? Jesus. 5 foot fuck all menace on the mid-strengths.
Yeah, well, fuck it. You're doing all right. You're not slubbering on your chest yet?
No.
Oh, man. We're in a good world. We're in the best time we've ever been in many fashions. There's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and look, to paraphrase Rage Against the Machine, even though they're traitors to me now, is that what better place than here and what better time than now?
Yes.
And, the corollary of crisis is opportunity.
What do you think about electric vehicles?
Not sold. I have to say I'm not sold. The electrification of the grid, I think, has a whole lot of problems that we haven't worked through properly. And the ability for a kill switch to be implanted in your car and if the government doesn't like what you're doing anymore and bang.
We're trying to regulate that. That's just commonplace.
Well, mate, look, I will never be buying an electric car while that is, and I'll be... No, I'm sorry. I'm just not going willingly into this technological dystopia while people just go, because we're sleepwalking into totalitarianism. That's what we are doing.
Yeah, tiptoe totalitarianism.
But
yeah.
I mean, Sheldon Wolin wrote a book called Inverted Totalitarianism in early 2004. And in a traditional totalitarian society like Germany in the 40s, it was the state dictating to the economic actors about what you want. So we went, Porsche, you go do this, and Hugo Boss, you go make the uniforms. Whereas
good uniforms, mate.
They were fantastic uniforms.
Did well.
But in a modern totalitarian society, it's the economic actors that dictate to the state. And we talked about the big government and big, corporate. They've become the same thing, and it's the same class of people. So we get back to the Marxist idea of class, and everyone wants. And this is what is fundamentally corrupted modern left-wing thought. Is I'm an old school lefty, or was an old school lefty, and I see power through the lens of socioeconomics, whereas the modern lefty sees power solely through the lens of identity. And if that's your sole conception of power, explain to me Condoleezza Rice. Because if Condoleezza Rice was around today launching an illegal invasion of Iraq under the false pretense that there was weapons of mass destructions, it would be celebrated as the girls moment. She's empowered. So we need more women at the highest level of international war crimes tribunals. that's the level of psychopathy that permeates left-wing thought these days.
Yeah. And
it's ideological schizophrenia.
It is. It is, because there's no fucking congruency. On one side, you're saying, my body, my choice, for when it comes to abortion.
Sometimes.
Yeah. And then when it comes to fucking the vaccines, you're a fucking demon for not having it. What's wrong with you? Oh my God.
Fucking funny to watch the likes of Clementine Ford to have to rationalise and justify what they'd said about the vaccine and my body, my choice, and then it was suddenly your abortion rights are up for grabs. Well, so you know what? If you couldn't,
it's such a quick pivot, eh?
Right?
It was such a quick pivot.
But if you couldn't be in the streets for my right to bodily autonomy, why the fuck should I be in the streets for yours? Do you know what I mean? Like, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And we come back to this thing about principles. And you will defend principles for people you don't like.
Yeah.
Groups you like, because they apply to everyone. And to see the intellectual gymnastics that people like Clementine Ford and Abby Chatfield had to engage in, it was just mwah, because they knew they were in all sorts of ideological knots and they couldn't untie themselves. And to watch them doing so, or attempt to do so, was just some of the most amazing cognitive dissonance porn I've ever had the privilege of jerking off to.
Fair. That being said, in terms of like the cognitive dissonance of being able to deal with shit and like have these arguments, I feel like it's definitely come about in the last 5 years that like our side of morals and thinking and principles has actually learnt again how to defend our ideas. Because we had no fucking idea more than 5 years ago. It was like, why is freedom of speech important?
No, we're talking about the wrong things. For sure.
Well, we had no need, right? We were so complacent because we just had it and we just expected it would never go.
We were cosseted,
but we're getting good now, and I think we are leading the rebellion, like as like the right is in this new wave of right, which is really the hippie movement in like a
modern,
in a different the modern hippie movement. Really,
it is.
Like we all just want to get off grid and say fuck you guys, you're fucking it up.
Well, I mean, and that goes back to that sort of Henry David Thoreau type of thinking of being self-sufficient and that rugged individualism and being able to defend and fend for yourself. And going back to what you were saying about defending ideas, I learned this in 2021 with the comedians in this country. When, people were cheering on the idea, or saying openly that I hoped I'd kill myself and that I should never work again. And those people cannot defend their ideas, let alone their own behaviour. And once you pierce the veil of the pronouns and the buzzwords and the flags, there's just fucking nothing there except
it's a
neuroses.
circular ideology.
Yep. They're trying to find an identity with that void.
And fundamentally, those people are just lost and they just want somewhere to belong.
Yeah, and that's where it comes back to love. Love thy neighbour as thy friend.
There's a lot of great wisdom in the teachings of Jesus, and I went to a religious school, and one of my favourite, moral parables was the woman who came into the temple and donated more than she could afford, and Jesus saw that, and he went in and gave her back more than what she'd put in, and everyone's wondering, well, why did he do that? And I was like, well, because she gave more than she could afford to, and she was doing it because it was the right thing to do, and no one was watching. And that was the same reason I did charity. I didn't do charity to service my own ego. I never boasted about the charity that I did. And I used to act for all the Extinction Rebellion protesters pro bono. And then when the woke tards in the fucking arts found out about it, they wrote to Extinction Rebellion saying, please don't use Corey White as your pro bono legal counsel anymore. He told an off-colour joke. Well, look at you saving the world, you idiots. These rainbow jelly beans who've got a fucking body of knowledge that consists of anorexia, and they wouldn't know a fucking power structure if it spiked their drink, fucked them in the ass, and offered them a Netflix special in the morning as hush money. Am I going to get cancelled for this?
That's fucking great. Oh, Lord.
I can't wait to go to Melbourne.
Oh, dude, you are going to, you might even need a fucking big boy friend.
Mate, I'm going to need a bodyguard because I'm telling you, I'm fucking afraid of what some of these hokey-wokey blue-haired pests are going to do because they're losing an election, mate. And when people can see that losing power They do all sorts of shit to hold on to it.
Yeah, well, what was with Dan getting back in? What was with that?
Stockholm syndrome and probably electoral fraud, but
Well,
I mean, you can't prove
actually, there was
that.
one thing. There was one thing that it was, it was deceptive conduct, in my opinion, was that they had a party saying sack Dan Andrews, and then all the fucking votes went to Labor.
Talk to Glenn Drury about that.
Yeah, okay. Do you know Glenn?
No, but I know what happened, and it's not my place to speak on it, but it's a scandal. And if there was any politically minded investigative journalists in this country, they'd be all over it.
Well, isn't that Rebel News? They're trying to be that, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, RVM, and he's an interesting cat, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, I really respect what he did during the COVID stuff, and that video he did out in Alice Springs the other day.
Yeah, I saw that last night.
Say what you will about Arvy, he's out on the ground and he's doing real journalism where
He's giving it a crack.
others aren't, and people go, he needs just his followers to throw in more money. Well, it's because they're not fucking subsidised to the nines by the federal government.
Look, I have nothing against people making money.
No,
I have nothing. If he wants to fucking ask people for money, that's fine. If you want to give him money, it's your right to give him money. If you like what he's doing, fucking who cares?
Yeah.
And even if he makes money, like what? He's supposed to be broke? Like no, he's built a whole platform and he's providing value that other people aren't providing. Like he should be rewarded for that. He should be rewarded handsomely.
He's an interesting cat though, because he talks about, we need a robust discussion and all you snowflakes, but you bring up Israel and he turns into a snowflake. It's just like
I haven't looked at that bit. What's the bit there?
Oh, well, people are very hyper defensive of Israel, and they conflate any criticism of Israel's human rights abuses in the West Bank or the Palestinians with being anti-Semitic, and they're two very different issues.
That's become a real big, de-weaponizing thing. It's like if you call anybody, that's like the last strawman, I think, that is being tested at the moment. Because you call people racist, you call people homophobic, you call people sexist. After the Trump administration, it's kind of it's lost its punch. It's still obviously effective in a corporate setting and stuff like that. But in terms of the cultural narratives of things, people go, oh, that again?
Yeah.
That tool again? But I think one that's still working is the anti-Semitism. And obviously there's real anti-Semitism in the world and there's a dark history of it. But I do think it looks like it's being thrown around willy-nilly.
Yes.
And it loses its power when that happens.
I agree. And when it's invoked on such a trivial basis, to me it undermines the suffering of those people who actually endured it.
Yeah, well, any of those words, right? Any of that, if you call someone a racist, that's akin to calling someone a fucking a murderer or a rapist. To be an actual racist and to hate another man because of the color of his skin is abominable. And how dare we throw that around when people have literally died because of that?
All these words get thrown around
just
so willy-nilly these days, and they're losing their meaning.
Do you agree, Bill?
Yes. What I always say is that you can't control what someone says.
Oh, of course not.
But totally wrong. It's just out of proportion.
It's like Voltaire's idea. It's I will disagree with you, but I will die for your right to say it.
Yeah.
And
I think we need manners. Manners have lost the equation.
And a
etiquette
civil
has
public
lost.
Discourse, the ability to respectfully disagree.
Yeah.
And agree to disagree.
I don't really like Extinction Rebellion, man. And you've clearly supported them a lot. I don't like what they're doing.
But I respected people who had the balls or the ovaries to go out and break the law in pursuit of what they believed in pursuit of a bigger moral purpose. And whether or not you agree with them is a different story. But I respected people who had the courage to do that.
Well, I guess in the premise of for unjust laws, I agree. But there are a lot of just laws that I don't think people should be breaking. I don't think people should be, just beating people up in the name of activism.
Violence begets violence, and I'm all for civil disobedience as long as it's peaceful, and that's how you win over the people you need to persuade. But also, human history is one big long story of who killed who to take what. And let's be honest about this. No one ever got what they wanted because they went and asked the elites politely.
True.
Rights are taken; they are not given, and
Well,
I
they're
think
earned.
well they're earned. But there's always, look at Martin Luther King or Gandhi in India. There were people waiting in the wings to become violent had those reforms not passed.
Yeah. I mean, they wanted to be violent the whole
Well,
time.
and it's a
Gandhi,
natural
in
human
that
impulse, right? We
example.
are a warlike creature,
Yeah, we're the apex predator. For
right?
fuck's sake.
Humans are retarded by war, and that's the thing. We're geared for it.
I mean, have you ever looked at the Instagram page Nature is Metal?
No,
Oh, dude, it's so good. It's literally just like hectic shit that happens in nature. And you go, yep, that's the real kind of savagery that actually
so
happens.
beautiful, and this is like no. Nature is utter brutality.
Oh, yeah, dude. Oh, man. Like, you see hyenas just ripping things to shreds and then
Yeah.
lions coming over and fucking them up. And
Well, that's
all
why
sorts.
even the farmers. You talk to me watching a fox eat a lamb coming out of its mother. They bastards. They're out there with their rifles any chance they can get.
Yeah, you got to be. Oh, funnily enough, all the soybean farms and all that. I was listening to somebody speak on this, and they said that anything that comes near vegetable crops or soy farms and all that, they have to kill literally everything with whether it be with pesticides, herbicides, guns, you name it, any kind of pest that gets involved in any of these crops. So to think that there's no death whatsoever, or even just like a tiny amount, like no, there's a lot of death.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. If you can't kill it, you shouldn't eat it. You've got to be able to see where your food comes from.
Yeah.
Because we're so disconnected from nature and the reality of food production to going and getting it from Foodland.
Yeah,
Right?
you've got to have the guts to do it.
I
Now-
completely agree.
I don't disagree with that we should have farmers and do the job because, it's a good productive source of doing it. I think grass-fed is definitely the way and we should have healthier food standards and stuff. But Australia's pretty good on the whole, especially if you compare it to America. I went to study abroad there. Oh, man, like the vegetables, the meat, it doesn't taste real.
Where'd you study abroad in the US?
New York.
Yeah, right.
Stony Brook on
Yeah,
Long
okay.
Island.
I did uni exchange, one of the best things I ever
Oh, where'd you
did.
do it?
In Denmark.
Oh, dude, that's cool.
Yeah.
What year?
I was in my fourth year.
Yeah,
So I
okay.
did a 5-year degree. I went on my fourth year.
What was it like in Denmark?
Denmark's wicked, mate. They're very tall people. So I kind of felt like the Hobbit walking around over there. I couldn't even reach up to Spike Girls' drinks. But the cold was different. I mean, because I'd never seen the snow. I got there in the summer, and then to see through autumn and the seasonal depression that takes root in those countries is quite a thing, because they change. They get sadder, and you don't see the sun, and you put on a heap of weight because you're inside eating and getting on the piss all the time. But I loved it, and I think it's something that all Australian uni students should do is go out and study abroad. And you know what I learned most when I felt so dumb as an Australian in Europe because I can only speak one language.
Oh, right.
Being the monolingual fucking idiots that we are, and
Yeah.
they laugh at us.
They do love us though.
They do love
Except
us.
for in France, in Paris.
Yeah, well, who
France
the
loves
fuck
us, but
cares
not
about
Paris.
Paris, Jesus
So I'm just
Christ.
saying they didn't like us.
But yeah, I think if we're going to be a player in the geopolitics of the Southern Hemisphere and the world for that matter, we need to teach the next generation languages, and we
Yeah,
need to be
I
learning
grew up-
Asian languages.
Yeah, well, that's fair. I mean, it looks like we're going to need to learn Chinese, but
Well, the joke is in the intelligence services, right? About the first layer of encryption that the Chinese have is Mandarin. So,
I heard this back in high school, like 2012, that in the future, in 2012, we're going to have to learn Chinese. I heard from a teacher.
yeah, well, it's fair enough, man. They're ganging it up, man. They're
There's a
doing
comedian
well.
mate of mine who passed away recently used to have a great joke about Americans, and he's just like, if it wasn't for us, you guys would be speaking Japanese, man. We saved your ass. If it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking Japanese. He goes, mate, that's bullshit. Australians would fucking never learn another language. So, it's testament to the anti-intellectualism which took root in this country. And my mum used to tell me stories about deliberately, doing bad in tests and stuff at school because you got teased for being the nerd and shit like that. Even I felt that in my time at school. And I just think that's such a sad thing that we've let take root in our culture. Like, and you see it now with the revenge of the nerds, because you see who the people who've got cultural power now are what you would have called nerds at school, and they're kind of taking that power out on the people who they perceived would have teased them at school. And it's all a bit of a mess at a cultural level. But the people who've got cultural power now should never be allowed to have political power, because I've seen the way they wield power at a cultural level. And
Who are you talking about?
Well, the people who've got the arts community. Let's take, for example, the LGBTQ community.
As a whole.
Because as on an individual, no problem with gay people. A lot of my best dealers are gay. And that's a joke. But, look at the World Pride thing. I mean, that surveillance technology that's been trialled out at Pride.
What was the surveillance technology?
Well, it's, you can get the mood of a crowd and monitoring the group, and it's all very sort of what we would have derided the Chinese for not that long ago with, monitoring in the surveillance state. And they get around and they talk about their oppression, right? And the gays did go through a lot. And I believe this was the first jurisdiction that did law reform for the gays in Australia. Don Dunstan's government, I believe.
I'd say so. We also did that. Women's rights. And also the Indigenous right to vote.
Yes.
We had to give that away at Federation, but we did it before Federation.
And, that community walks around the streets in their arseless chaps, flying their flag, claiming that they're oppressed. And they've got a whole bloody month. And just the disparity of remembrance. Well, let's look at the numbers, shall we? We've got Sorry Day, Anzac Day, Reconciliation Day, NIDOC Week, and Pride Month. It's a bit fucking out of whack. And my problem with that community is that the rainbow lights are on, but there's no one home. And they know nothing about everything. And they posture themselves as the intellectual leaders of society, right? The searing intellects of the Melbourne bosom. But once you pierce the veil, you find out there's fucking nothing there. And they're interested in solely their own vanity. And, I'm unvaccinated. I'm what? 6% of the population at most, similar to what the gays represent in the Australian population. You know what I'm not doing is demanding that we remake society in my own image, and that we go and put a flag on everything, the unvaccinated flag. Why does every group need a flag? It's very 19th century politics for me.
Yep.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? How
do we get here?
How do we get here? Well, I mean, I just think we became complacent. We were apathetic. We were too distracted by the phones.
Yeah.
All the titillation.
Phones. They've been looking at this shit since the 50s, like Aldous Huxley, 1984, George Orwell. Like their
minds would be blown if they could see what's happened to us today.
It's happened. No, but it's happening. It's exactly what they said would happen is happening. You look at, we're not that far away to the point where we're going to have babies be born in pods.
Ecto farms.
Yeah, you saw you saw Ecto Life.
Yeah, well, I mean, I looked at that and it's just like, well, was that a hoax? I mean, but we go back to this point of...
But it's possible. That's the thing. It's all possible.
But you don't know what's real anymore. And that's why I love
look at IVF.
Yeah.
We have a civilization that is relying on IVF because we don't probably have good enough diets and lifestyles and, I don't know, activities in fucking life to do it.
So a friend of mine, he and his partner were struggling to conceive, been trying for a while. The doctor said to him, you're going to need to do IVF, and it's actually quite expensive.
Oh, it's super expensive.
And his partner went to a naturopath, and the naturopath tested the pH level of her vaginal fluid.
Super acidic.
And said, go and put that into your diet for 2 weeks. Bang, conceived. I mean, these are the things that are affecting us.
Yeah.
We are poisoned by poisoned food. Poisonous chemicals everywhere in your house. I don't want to sound like an altruistic hippie who charges no crystals under the full moon, but
it's the truth.
It's the truth.
Wait, to be fair, look, crystals, they do shit. Like, we use crystals for technology. Like we know that crystals are conductive. Like we use them. So,
and I'm completely open-minded about these things now. This is why I always was hostile to atheism, because atheism had that arrogant certainty that there is nothing, whereas I'm more agnostic, and I've had some things happen to me in the last 2 years of my life that have made me much more open to this idea of astrology, and this was good enough for ancient civilizations, and I guess it's the basis of the Christianity that we know. So who knows, mate? It's all I know is that I don't know everything, and I just know that you need to ask the right questions, and that's why good cross-examination and good jokes are really important, because a good question, like a good joke, exposes, it illuminates, it highlights. And going back to that point about comedy, it's the last thing I know that's real anymore. In an era of deep fakes, a room full of people laughing when someone's up there speaking their truth, that's the last thing I know that's real. And it's the most pure form of democracy, because you can't control how you vote, because laughter is involuntary. So that's why I think what I do is worth pursuing wholeheartedly. And, I could go back and have a comfortable life at the bar and be a lawyer. But I just think, I've had enormous privilege in my life, and the corollary of privilege is responsibility, and it's a responsibility to the public interest.
Yeah, if you can speak up, you do it. That's where we're at.
Yeah, just get good enough to be silenced by the security services, and
It's like a dance, isn't it?
it is a dance, yes.
Well, this might get banned off some platform.
Well, look, being banned is the new awards at comedy festivals. You know what I mean? It's like, who wants the best newcomer award when they go, no, we don't like what you have to say about the festival director and the fact she's been in the job 30 years. No, shut up, Corey.
I had an elderly individual say to me, when they realized I was an artist, I was like, oh, you're not one of those comedians that travel around Australia, are you? I was like,
yeah. If you've been on the project, you're shit. Like and if you get on the Melbourne Comedy Festival gala, like 9 out of 10, you're shit. And this is the other thing. I've got such a beef with some of the comedians in this country, because they got paid by the health departments to do paid promotions on their Instagram about the vaccine, and
that's just so sellout, isn't it?
Right, and it's treason to your art. I mean, art is not, it's about holding a mirror up to society, not to parrot the talking points of the government and the corporate sector. I mean, and if you've got the same opinions as the government and a majority of the private sector as an artist, you should probably go and examine how you found those opinions.
Yeah, probably. I do give a bit of grace for the starting period.
Yes, starting period, I agree.
Look, I'm going to give people the grace of the first year. I do think you probably should have been onto it earlier, because, it was the most important thing happening in the fucking world. However, I'll give you the grace of a year. If you didn't know after a year, you couldn't have been too busy, because we're all at home.
Well, and it was the censorship, and you couldn't help but notice the censorship. And, how fast this has moved in the internet space in the last 4 years. I mean, in 2019, you could live stream a massacre in a mosque from Christchurch.
Yes.
Right? And now horrendous. I can't get a fucking Joe Rogan clip on YouTube. What the fuck?
I mean, Joe Rogan did move a lot of his content off YouTube.
Yes, I take your point. But I mean,
But yeah, no, I get your point.
There was lots of people who are being silenced off YouTube.
Definitely, 100%.
For me, the tech companies have shown their hand.
I'm keen to see what's next, though. However, there's a bunch of players trying to recreate all the existing tech platforms, and it's not the fucking way. It's not the way. Innovate. Find a way to innovate, because nobody's just going to move over to your platform that doesn't have as good a user experience or fucking suggestion ranking as all these other platforms that have been doing it for decades longer. Find a better way to do content and give it to us, and everybody will move there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
I probably wish it was a different way. If everybody did move to Rumble, it probably would be a good thing. However, why the fuck would you when it's not better than YouTube? Like, the user experience is difficult.
Yes. But, I mean, the user experience at YouTube is what it is because of the data harvesting and the amount of money they've been able to make from selling the data.
They started
Just copy them.
Well, that was how Google started turning a profit, right? It was selling the data. And my generation, we were the first ones to take up social media, and we did it so naively, because if the product if you're getting it for free, you're the product.
Yes.
And we didn't realize this. And all the personality tests that you could do. It's like, oh, what kind of personality type are you? And this was all data sets that have been used to influence elections. I mean, look at the Cambridge Analytica stuff. And the days of being able to have free and fair elections, I think, are gone.
Yeah, well, I mean, did you see the Joe Rogan podcast about the guy? He's supposedly the only company in the world that's actually doing all this ethereal testing of like Google and such, and saw that if you're suggested, if you type in, I don't know, Joe Biden, it comes up with the first 4 or first 7 suggestions on your Google search. Those things, even if you're not clicking on whatever, will program you into what you think about that person. So if you write Trump and it says Trump is a liar, Trump is a dad, Trump is a dad, all these negative connotations, you get subconsciously affected. And because the mass population, isn't politicking heavy, they're not checking this stuff religiously because, they got life to live. Who the hell wants to? And they found that it had like a 90% effect on those that were moderates in how they would vote.
Isn't that stunning?
Yeah.
Isn't that stunning? It's a dark art, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a very dark art.
It's the ethereal things like that nobody's holding or keeping data on that kind of stuff from these huge companies. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not trackable, it's not traceable. It's these people went out and did these double-blind studies and selected a random population and went and tested all this.
You know what I would be willing to bet is that all the most stunning insights into humans and group psychology is probably under lock and key, probably all classified, because look at what the Nazis were able to learn about human biology and all sorts of medicine when they weren't restrained by ethics.
Yes.
And we didn't put that sort of information to one side because it was unlawfully or improperly obtained. It's just part of the massive medical information.
I mean, look, let's be real. They gave us like some fucking phenomenal understanding.
Insights, right? But I bet you everything I have that the CIA did all those experiments under the MK Ultra program, and there's things they know about human psychology and human behavior that are really illuminating and that are kept from us.
Well, they already said that at Davos. They said we know how to biohack humans like we have never before. We know how to completely biohack people.
Gosh, I mean, I just wish a fucking meteorite would land in that town when everyone's there, including Sarah Hanson-Young.
Well, I'll tell you what. As the scriptures of the globe say, of ancient time, when the world was acting unholy, God made it flood. And the ancient stories that, who knows if it's the truth or not, but it's definitely passed down for many a time, is that there was essentially like fallen angels, the Nephilim, that were like these giants and whatnot, and they were essentially raping and pillaging, like these angels and stuff, were raping and pillaging and controlling the just human population. And then it got so like insidious and it got so debaucherous and just bad that God made it flood. And that's the mythological story, or I don't know, the deep spiritual story, if you will. However, there is also another part of history that is being uncovered now by Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson.
Yes, I'm familiar with those boys.
It was just a big old meteor shower, and we went through it every 12,000 years, and that's what caused it. So, how much the spiritual essence of it all plays into, and how interdimensional we are, and how that all affects things, because, well, that's the teaching of all religions, is that we're spiritual beings and this is a spiritual universe and everything is connected.
Yes. And you're seeing a renaissance in this sort of stuff too. And I notice it on the dating apps because I'm, painfully single. People identify as...
I'm there with you, buddy.
spiritual but not religious.
Oh, that's where they go wrong.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah, because spirit is like the pillar, I feel like we are spiritual beings living a human existence at the same time. So it always comes down to the human spirit. But then it's hard to define that because it's all around us. and it's hard to identify how it's shaped. That's where we don't know what's next, because it's a spiritual tale that's going on, basically.
So what's wrong with being spiritual then, and not being religious?
Oh no,
it's not workable, because that was what he said.
Yeah, but you do need religion. But then I'm saying that religion like teaches spirituality.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
okay. So it's a doctrine. Yeah, well, look, it is a doctrine. It's the technology of teaching spirituality and an
Magic
effective way to
mushrooms
live
taught
life.
me spirituality, I have to say.
Oh, look, there's many cultures across the world that have learnt from hallucinogenics of many a kind. I found out the Australian Indigenous actually have a version as well. Have you heard of this?
I was in your museum today and I read about this.
Oh, they had it in there.
Yes, there's a
The cactus.
No. There was all sorts of plants because Australian plants, particularly the acacia, have the highest concentration of DMT.
Yeah, that's it. The acacia. Is that not a cactus? I thought it was a cactus.
No.
Oh.
But yeah, there's an Australian tobacco. There was all sorts of different plants that they were using, and I always suspected that because if you go into the northwest of Western Australia, you can see the Aboriginal artworks that Rio Tinto and BHP and FMG haven't destroyed. Is that they've painted the landscape from a bird's eye view.
Yeah,
that's quite astonishing to be able to have done that. And every ancient culture around the world has used psychedelics in some form.
Do you know who else did that? Quite prolifically? The Peruvians, the Incas.
And they were high as kites at ceremonies, as were the Greeks. You go to Eleusis, and
They all were. There's even, I mean, you probably heard the stoned ape theory.
yes, and
It makes sense.
it makes complete sense to me.
It's a possible. It's definitely a possibility. And I mean, there's also that mushrooms are actually alien. Is another thing that they came on an asteroid. I mean, it probably did. Everything kind of came on an asteroid, didn't it? But that's another theory. Is that it came from another planet.
The world's largest living organism is a fungus.
That's it.
Have you seen Paul Stamets?
No, what's Paul Stamets?
Paul Stamets is the mushroom guru, but he's written a book, How Mushrooms Can Save the World, and all these different industrial applications for, I guess, breaking down plastics. They've got a mushroom that can eat plastic.
I have seen that.
And, I mean, what a thing to be trying to help get along.
That's our biggest issue when it
Fucking
comes
plastic.
to conservationists. Like the earth.
Imagine the
plastic is
mushrooms
huge.
that, can eat plastic.
Well, they can, right?
And if you
And you can make
industrialise that.
leather.
Leather,
Leather out of plastic.
can help people heal their trauma, addiction issues, I mean,
Yeah.
all sorts of things.
Mental, just cognitive function. Like
So-
there's
That's a
thousands
lot.
of mushrooms.
Yeah, there's so
And
many
some of them kill you.
applications. Yeah, right. Yeah, the death cap mushroom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some deathly ones, They're not for us.
No.
Or maybe they are. Maybe fucking
Maybe we
killing
just-
yourself was just a regular part of society. And if you wanted to do your, what's it called?
Euthanasia.
Euthanasia, you just took a fucking death cap mushroom. I don't know. It's there. There's a lot of things in nature that kill you. Did ancient civilizations go, you know what? I'm done with life. I'm just going to fucking take this and die.
Well, I think that's a healthier perspective. Is I don't know, but I would like to know.
Right? That's interesting.
Curious minds.
Yeah. Well, look, we find out things.
We do. And that's what's so funny about modern medicine is that most of the advances in modern medicine have come by accident. Look at Pfizer. They found Viagra by accident. They were trying to find a drug to treat a heart condition and they cured erectile dysfunction by accident.
There you go. I didn't know that. They've done one good
So-
thing. For the boys.
Yeah, the boy. Well, it's for the girls too. Come on, let's be honest. There's a lot of women out there who are very happy about Viagra entering the marriage.
It's true. It's very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout outs to the girls
Shout outs to the girls
and the boys.
and the boys and
boys.
the non-binaries.
Yeah, what are you?
I'm very binary. I like to think, because things aren't black and white. There is a grey area. So what I like to preach is non-binary thinking.
Well, I think, fair enough. That's good. And I was chatting with these younger cats, and I got this is one of the previous podcasts, and I went, and they were like, Operation Flinders are involved with that, which, if you don't know what that is essentially where they take kids that I guess having an issue with the schooling system and some of them just in life in general, and they go out to Flinders Ranges and they do these big old fucking hikes and they live out in nature and stuff like that. and they come together as a community. And I was talking to this dude that's gay and his sister that's like non-binary or whatever, and I was like, this is my understanding of what all this means, is that there is a spectrum of masculine and feminine energy, and you are a male and you're a female, and you've just put labels on where you feel like you are on that spectrum of masculine and feminine energy. Because you can be a bloke, obviously, as we know, and you be super effeminate. Like, look at Michael Jackson, for example. Dude was super effeminate. Like, did that mean he was gay? Well, he says no. So, it's
and I think it was Carl Jung who said, like, inside the most masculine man, you'll find a very feminine side, and inside the most feminine woman, you'll find a very masculine side. And it's the balance, right? It's the yin and the yang. And I'm all for a renaissance of Jungian psychology. I think Jung has a lot of great insights into modern psychology that we ignore at our own peril.
Yeah, fair enough. I've only heard good things from him. And creativity. You obviously live your life through creativity. That's a feminine, that's a feminine activity, creativity. Like,
well, I mean, certainly not in stand-up, because most women aren't funny as stand-up, and I don't mean that in a sexist, demeaning way. It's just the proof's in the pudding, right? Women are great sketch comics, great writers, but in terms of, stand-up performance, and this is going to get me in a lot of trouble.
But is that a delivery thing?
I think it's probably something to do with men are more geared for combat. Because good stand-up's combative, I think. And you've got to have a bit of dash and dare and a willingness to take a risk. And women are quite risk-averse. And look, don't get me wrong, there's some fucking great women.
Yeah, I've heard comedians. A few. What was it?
But
Andrew Schultz had a good lady on.
But there are, by and large, most of them aren't. And they're the most propped up and subsidised in the industry. I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying that.
That's That's a regular thing, right?
But, Christopher Hitchens wrote that great essay, Why Women Aren't Funny, years ago. And he was saying, well, there's a biological and evolutionary imperative to that, because if you were unattractive physically, you had to be able to attract a mate by making them laugh.
Hell yeah.
And women didn't need that.
Even good-looking blokes have to do it.
Right.
Did you see that study, the Tinder study? They put the profile of this like full model level guy, like just sexy. And then they put a fat woman. And guess how many? So the guy got 180 likes in like a week or whatever. Guess how many the fat lady got?
None.
450. Bro, at the marketplace, dudes will do it. Dudes will take what they can get.
What's funny is that when I started psychology, I said to my psychologist that, I pride myself as a lawyer on giving frank and fearless advice, sometimes often to my own financial detriment, but, I'm there to put my client's interest ahead of mine. And I want you to give me the same. I want brutal honesty from you as a professional. She said, are you sure? I said, yes. So after a few sessions, she said, are you ready for the brutal honesty? And I said, yeah. She said, I don't think you'll ever have healthy adult relationships with women. And I put that in my Bumble profile. And in one day, I had like 28 matches.
You're the red flag they wanted.
Well, I was like, you tell women you're a red flag and they want to climb the pole, Like,
it's so true.
It's absurd to me.
So true. You know what's the worst? Is like, as a guy and as a romantic man, you want to do that old-fashioned courting at heart. You want to be the romantic. You want to talk to them. You tell them how wonderful they are. You want to show them the best experience. And modern dating just teaches you, oh, look, you can be romantic when you're with them, but when you're not, you need to act like you just don't even know they exist. And it's ridiculous.
But it's effective.
It is, but that's what I'm saying. That's the way to do it.
It's horrific. And this is what I find so interesting about women with the bad boy complex, or who are attracted to the bad boys. And I think there's an element of the subconscious there. It's like, oh, he's a strong man. He can protect me in my cave from,
Just for the record, I'm not a bad boy.
I'm a bad boy with a soft heart. Yeah, no, I find that really interesting psychology, that the women are attracted to that type of man, particularly at a young age.
Yeah, well, look, you want to do that's doing shit, right?
Or can do shit.
Yeah, well, can do shit. So
Would it be the side that the woman or female there might be looking for unconsciously?
I think it is unconsciously for sure.
wait, what was that? I missed that. What'd you say?
I was saying, like, wouldn't that be like the female's side or way of looking for what they're seeing unconsciously, which is a strong man or a bad boy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, a strong man from the age old dot has been like useful, and that strength doesn't have to just be physical. You
No.
can be have intellectual prowess, and that's why rappers are seen as so fucking sexy, because you are, and comedians, might I add, because you are just linguistically phenomenal. Like, you have a way of words that is just unparalleled. Like, how can you beat a rapper with words when he's doing out punchlines and doing things with his mouth that nobody else can do? Like,
Yeah.
anybody can say words,
And
right?
rappers are special sort of freaks in my view. But, it's testament to the adage that the pen is mightier than the sword.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely both. Yeah,
But it was like what Kennedy said, it's like the men who create power, the strong men, make a great contribution to the nation's greatness, but the men who question power make an equal, if not, just as necessary contribution to the nation, because they determine whether we use power or power uses us. And that's why the role of the artist is so important in society, because you have to hold a mirror up to society, and sometimes you got to sail against the current of your own time, and it's not a popular thing to do. I can tell you, I would not have taken some of the positions that I have just to be liked. I did it because it was what I thought was the right thing to do, and in best serving your vision of the truth, you best serve your country, and that's what I try to do with my art. Is I'm not a patriot in the fucking truest sense of the word, but I try to be a good, responsible citizen and try and use my privilege for good.
Fair enough. I agree. I feel the same way about my life. At the end of the day, you can just go live a life where you don't have to cause any disruption. We're at a very easy time to do that. And you could get some money in the process. There's many ways to make money, and a lot of them aren't that hard.
No.
So, and you can go have nice things, but we got 100 years. We got 100 years, and are you going to make noise? Are you going to contribute something to your society? Or are you just going to be comfortable? Because if you're just going to be comfortable, it's like, well, you're not really adding anything.
No. You're just an automaton and a drone.
And that's not to say people in business, like, let's be real. If you're providing value in business, that's very important. But if you're just spending your days doing surveys for your life, and you're just like, making
life with meaning and purpose. And you know what? It's like some of the comedians I know resent me for that fact. It's just like, well, because I ride the zeitgeist with what I do, and they're just all they got to talk about is themselves. And I think comedians, that just talk about themselves. What's the old quote? There's people, small minds discuss themselves and great minds discuss ideas.
Yeah.
And people are so sick of just hearing people talk about themselves, or this is my sexual identity, right? It's like, if that's all you got to talk about, you're one-dimensional and you're fucking boring.
That's why I like what Kendrick Lamar does, because he melds all those worlds together. At the same time as he'll be talking about himself in an event, he's painting the context of a broader societal idea and conversation.
You did tell me this the other night. I've been meaning to listen to that. I'm going to listen to that on the way home.
Dude, Kendrick is the man.
Did you go see him live?
Not the last time he came, but the time before he came. And get this, so I'm there in New York while I'm on exchange. I see on my phone, Kendrick Lamar concert tomorrow night, Williamsburg, secret concert. I was like, fuck yeah, go on Craigslist, try to find a ticket. They're like $400. I was like, nah, that's too much. Let me just go get scalpers. There's scalpers everywhere there. And I get there and there's no scalpers in sight. So I'm like, fuck, dude, how are we going to get in it? It's like December, peak winter. And I go up to this producer there. And I go, hey, no, not hey, man. I go, hey, mate, I'm from South Australia. I've come all the way to see Kendrick Lamar. Is there any chance that I can go see Kendrick? And I'm standing there with George, my girlfriend, and Eliza at the time. And, dude, the producer goes, mate, there's not a chance that you can get tickets. This is a 400-person Kendrick Lamar concert for, like, Amex holders. There's Victoria's Secret models in there. Like, there's just not a chance. It's closed. There's no tickets. Head goes down, start walking away. And I, in my in my soul, I'm just like, I'm not fucking giving up. We're getting in somehow. I knew it. 3 minutes later of standing there, that same producer walks back out, hands George and I 2 staff passes and goes, Merry Christmas.
Oh, what a legend.
And we're like, see you later, girls.
Nah, you had to go.
Yeah, you had to. And you know what? If they didn't understand, like, sorry, that's on you, girls. Like, don't tell me they wouldn't have done the same thing to you. It's like, sorry, we're only letting in the chicks.
Oh, dude. Oh, well, at the end of the day, like, he's like my icon. You know what I
Bitch,
mean?
don't kill my vibe.
And the beautiful thing was, this is when Untitled Unmastered came out. So he was playing in this 400-person concert, everything from Section 80 all the way to Untitled Unmastered, songs throughout his career. And like we were like chilling and up on like the mezzanine, and then we got to the front near the end of the concert. And I swear he looked at me like 7 times throughout the concert.
What the fuck is this white guy doing in the crowd?
But then I'm rapping along with him at the top of my lungs, front row, to like, I love myself. World is a ghetto. Dun, 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 dun. It's like a great song. Anyway, third verse gets all aggressive in the tone of voice, and it's hell raspy and all that. And I'm doing top of my lungs along with him. He looks at me dead in the eyes. I'm like this far away from him, between you and I. Looks at me dead in the eyes, moves the mic away, nods at me, pulls the mic back, continues rapping. And I'm like,
Nice.
I just gotta acknowledge my Kendrick Lamar.
That's gangsta.
Nice.
It was cool.
Wow.
Who's your favourite rapper?
Kendrick Lamar.
Kendrick Lamar?
Yeah.
You?
Me? I would say J. Cole. That's the main person I listen to.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm going to have to go with Low Key.
Low Key. Who's Low Key?
He's a British Arab guy. Well, he says he's an Arab amongst the Brits and a Brit amongst the Arabs, but there's no one who's got a depth of historical knowledge and introspection and flow like him. He's phenomenal. Him and Immortal Technique, I think, are
Immortal Technique's great. I like
the
Immortal
best rappers going around. But I've recently been loving Tupac again.
Fair. Do you do songs or albums?
Well, predominantly on the songs. I've got Holler at Me on heavy rotation at the moment. And when I went through that thing the other day, you and I spoke about, my best friend called me. He's like, all right, this is a song that you need to listen to right now. And yeah, it got me through. Good energy. I love Tupac.
Oh, dude. Tupac is fucking the man.
And his mum was amazing too.
Yeah.
She was in the Black Panthers and smelt a rat of one of the undercover operatives, and the informant claimed he was an informant. No one believed her. Turns out he was. He ratted on them all. She represented herself at trial and cross-examined him and dismantled him and got acquitted. And that was not in any fucking legal textbook I came across. And it was only because I found the Adam Curtis films. So
That's what, dude.
Athenia Shakur. And if you want to see that, it's Can't Get You Out of My Head, episode 2.
Yeah, okay. Is it on Netflix?
YouTube. And it's
Okay.
free.
Even better.
No ads. That's how you know it's good.
Hell, legit, eh? Oh, man. Yeah, I'd say Michael Jackson's my number 1 of all time, though.
Yeah. No, I never grew up on too much Michael.
Oh, Man in the Mirror.
Yes, good song.
Will You Be There? Keep the Faith.
Yeah.
Woo. Woo. Nobody's fucking with that. Nobody is inspiring the whole world and literally going to countries and being introduced as literal royalty.
Yeah.
Like Michael Jackson was around the world. He is the biggest dude to have ever been in the fucking world.
He was huge.
And you know what? He wasn't a masculine man,
No. He was very feminine, wasn't he?
but he was so like in
was in his
himself and in his element and in his own muse that he broke down every single barrier that existed.
Yep.
He was like the enlightened man of music.
Mm.
And the world.
Yeah. I mean, look, I was speaking with my friend Jazzy, and he was like, when I was growing up in China, guess how we learnt English? We were looking at Heal the World, and we were like figuring out what it means in class. Like, what a way to learn a language.
And
with
that's
such
such
a
a
message.
great example of, soft power and how a nation can spread their cultural ideas through the power of art. And what a great way to spread the message about how good your culture is comparative to that one, or the political system you have compared to that one. And that was how the Americans won the Cold War in many ways, was their soft power. But now, who wants American ideas?
No.
Large, except for libertarianism, really, and free speech.
Yeah, well, the ideas that they're raised on, right? The fundamentals. The fundamentals are phenomenal. It's just unfortunate. I was listening to a book called Hard Times Create Strong Men by Stefano Ranio.
Oh, yeah?
And he was saying that based on his research and all that democracy has a 250-year cycle to rise and fall. And we have great wars, big great wars every 80 years, in 80-year cycles. And America's at its 250-year cycle. And we're well overdue for our 80-year cycle.
Well, that's what keeps the American economy going, is war.
Yeah, but like a big war. Like not just not these proxy wars, like a big war.
I hope not.
Oh, that's just, I mean, the world's gearing up for it. But you know what? There's also the revolution of people becoming more deeply spiritual and going within. It's happening more and more. You're having all these huge meditation fests with millions of people around the world actually getting connected with the nature of existence and the spirit of the universe. And that's happening. And, you know, you touched on that when you were talking about mushrooms and stuff like that, and this ayahuasca and you name it. Like, what does that do? That gets you in touch with the spirit of the universe.
Can I just say, Hamish, how much this blows my mind? Like, if I was, 10 years ago, to hear a guy who identified as part of, the young liberal movement to be talking about these topics, sitting here in a suit, you would have blown my fucking mind. But I think it's just a sign of optimism and progress that, we're getting to this point, and good on you for taking up the fight. Because Bernard Collaery said to me in Sydney, he said, I hope I find some young men who are willing to take up the fight and defend this country and the democracy and the things that my father died for. So good on you, mate.
Thank you. And good on you, man. You're literally out there going around the country battling for this.
Yeah, well, it's like, what, you hit people over the head with a sledgehammer, and then most of them, nothing comes out. But it's nice to know that there's lots of people who've got lots of, things between their ears, and that, have a strong social conscience and a desire to leave this place in a better state than the way they found it. And that's what conservatism is for me, is to leave it in a better state than when you found it.
Yeah, well, that's essentially what it is. It's entrepreneurship and small government.
And family.
And family, definitely. Definitely. I mean, that's the fundamental pillar of success of life.
I've been coming back to this question myself, it's like, am I a fucking old school conservative?
Dude, I think you are. Unfortunately, the word conservatism and conservative doesn't have the seductive air that progressive and liberal have.
No, but I mean,
they're not. They win the league, the word games.
This is what my philosophy of comedy is, though. Like, comedy should not belong to a sphere of ideology. And my entire life, right, like, the lefties were the champions of comedy, but at some point, I don't know what it was in recent times, it's that the conservatives have become the champions of comedy now. And that's a tectonic shift culturally. But I don't think, and this is where I think Jordan Shanks went wrong with Friendly Geordies, is he hitched his wagon to the Labor Party. And I think as a comedian, you have to be seen to be impartial, or have the ability to criticise what's perceived to be your own team. And I think he's lost that ability. So, Jordan, if you're listening, mate, that's my advice to you. And lay off the SAS. They've been through enough.
There you go. Get your head in order. No, but I also feel in terms of like conservatism of today, it's like, I don't think it's as socially conservative, because I think that all the movements that have been happening in our culture is like, has pushed us forward. That's like, I mean, it goes back to even what you were saying, like a good religion is something that allows you to be more tolerant and stuff like that. Because I feel like when you think of the idea of conservatism, it paints this light of like an old school conservatism that isn't tolerant and isn't kind and isn't friendly. But I've never actually met a proper conservative man or woman that like isn't kind.
Yeah, but that was, I guess, the face of conservatism I grew up with in this country, and I'm a bit older than you boys, so I mean, I guess that's coloured by my experience of the Howard years and Tony Abbott. But fucking even some of the things Tony Abbott said, that, generated an enormous pylon. I'm finding now that it's like, I agree with that.
But he also doesn't seem like a mean bloke by any means. Like he like spends most of his private life like doing charity work and like firefighting and life saving.
Yeah,
like,
look, I think Tony Abbott's a misunderstood bloke, but he also, he presided over some pretty terrible policy choices and said some things that he was very gaff prone.
What do you mean gaff?
Well, he'd say the wrong thing publicly and, he'd misspeak, as Hillary Clinton would say. But, I remember when he said that the welcome to country was becoming tokenism. And I'd written a joke around that time about the welcome to country. And I was a little bit afraid to say it in some places. But I agreed with him because it had become a platitude and something that just white people said to make themselves feel better, but then they went back to the status quo and they were reaping the benefits of all the, I guess, the modern colonialism that they claim to rail against. That was the joke that got me in trouble really at the Fringe Festival, because it was the welcome to country joke, and it was highlighting the fact that the Fringe Festival kicked all the traditional owners out of the park for a month. And it was like, hey, welcome to country, And the CEO who arranged that, his wife laughed at that joke. And that's why the CEO came for me, because I embarrassed him in front of his wife.
Yeah.
And beware of a wealthy white man with a wounded ego.
Oh, look, I think, yeah.
So that's why you don't have to worry about me, because I'm not wealthy.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
hope you become wealthy.
I'm rich with love, as my nan would say.
As Bob Marley said, what kind of riches do you,
Yeah.
all that.
Bob Marley's another great.
He is a great. I love his music.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Didn't he die because he just didn't chop his toe off that had cancer?
Was it?
I'm pretty sure
it was
that's-
something like that.
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure it was like he found out he had toe cancer,
Yeah.
and then it went all the way to his heart because he was like, as my Rastafarian, I do not like cut anything off. Like he doesn't cut his hair. I'm not cutting my toe.
Fair.
And then he died. I'm pretty sure.
Well, he never cut off his nose to spite his face, old Bob.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Hamish. It's been a pleasure. Bjort, done a great job behind the sound desk there, mate. And I look forward to coming back to the great state of South Australia, because we have a lot in common, WA and SA.
We do.
We're both footy mad.
We both say hell yeah.
We both hate Melbourne. And we're the only two states the British did nuclear testing in. So
That's it.
you got a history lesson and a bit of society, politics, economics and culture here.
Yes, you are a very knowledgeable and astute man. I will say that.
Thank you, Hamish. I got it from my mother. So
Shout out to your mum. Where can we find you online?
on my Instagram, at Nate Flog, or my Substack is the Jolly Gag Man. So I write and publish there, and I do a few pods there, and got to get a bit more tech savvy. And if anyone wants to be my manager and is great and all those things, and wants to help me out, please get in touch with me. I'm recruiting.
It's a job, yeah?
Yeah. Noah, I'm building an ark, and in preparation for the great flood.
It's coming.
It's coming. So if you want to get on board and you've got some skills that you can bring to the table, let's talk, because I'm shopping around.
Excellent.
Join the fight.
Listen, What's Your Voyage? Please like, subscribe on whatever platform you're on. Leave a review, 5 stars. Interact with us online. We love it. And thank you for joining the Knowledge Share.